Is it on? Hello. Oh, hey guys. I think I'm live. Let's see how it looks. Trying to get the right angle. TT, how's it looking over there? Is it on?
I'm trying to get the...
Anyone here? Say hello.
Which one are... Oh, here, I think... Nope, that's a profile picture.
Oh. Larry's there.
Oh,
I
there
think
you go.
there. Hi, Larry. Am I upside down or around?
Yeah, you're...
Hi, Sherry. How are you?
You're sideways.
Oh, I'm sideways? All right. I got to do it this way. Now, here's the hoping that my iPad doesn't switch. Oh, can you turn that? Oh. That my iPad doesn't slip down this little bootleg tripod I just got from Amazon. I'm a little afraid. There we go. I think. How's that look? No, not yet. Let's move this back just a little. How's everyone doing tonight? Let us know. We have TT Lio here doing the ones and twos. Hi, Instagram. How are you? Chefleen here. We're about to get started any minute now. All right. We have our water boiling back. Anyone cooking along tonight? Anyone cooking along? All right. We have Gil ups on Instagram. Ooh, hey Monique. Hey Gil.
Larry said much better.
What's going? Awesome. Great. Okay, now everyone say a little prayer that this thing doesn't slip down. And if it does, we'll be right back. It just might. Hopefully my iPad doesn't crash. Hey Steph, how are you on Instagram over there? So we have two live streams going, everyone. How is everyone doing? Welcome to Real Life Cooking with Chefleen. So great to be back with you. I got a lot of great feedback from last week. Today we're going to be making halibut with chimichurri, potatoes, roasted potatoes, and spicy spinach. It's a really healthy meal, but it's a really easy meal, pretty quick to put together. This week I'm going to try to be a little stickler on the time a little bit, and I'm going to have a timer. Oh, you guys can't see it, but I'm going to set 45 minutes, and hopefully we are all done in 45 minutes. As usual, feel free to ask questions. We have our tech goddess guru. I don't know why I say both, but I think it's cool. TT Lio on the ones and twos, reading your questions because I can't see that far away. So yeah, we're going to go ahead and get started. I am Chefleen. Welcome if you are just joining. Today, again, we're going to be making halibut with chimichurri, potatoes, and spinach. Let us know if you're cooking along. Excellent. Woo, Stephanie, we have you cooking along in your kitchen in Queens. And I am here in Harlem, straight live from my actual kitchen, ready to cook with you. All right, so the first thing, oh yeah, let's set the timer, 45 minutes, an honest 45 minutes. But this is real life, so sometimes, you know.
Steph said, did I miss a step? Should I be boiling water?
No, yes. I asked you to have some simmering water on your stovetop. So yeah, get a pot of boiling water if you're not ready with that. I'm gonna start my timer. And so welcome one more time. I feel like a lot of people joined from far away and I still can't see, but welcome. I'm Chefleen. Welcome to Real Life Cooking. Today again, we're gonna be making halibuts. One of my favorite fishes, actually. I don't really like fish that much, but halibut has a special place in my heart. With some chimichurri, roasted potatoes, and spinach, all in hopefully under 45 minutes. I'll be answering your questions as I can. TT Lio will be writing them down and saying them out loud. So feel free to comment, question. Any question, doesn't have to be anything to do with what we're doing today. Just type it on in. It's community. I'm excited. So what we're going to do, oh, I didn't.
You press that.
You know what? I never use this timer, so maybe I don't know how to work it. Oh. No, it doesn't. It didn't work.
It didn't work.
All right, well, TT Lio will also be the timekeeper back there. All right, so today, halibut with chimichurri, roasted potatoes, and spicy spinach. We're going to do, I'll go through the procedure really quick. We're going to first blanch our spinach. That's why we have our pot of boiling water here. We're then going to get started on potatoes, which are going to be the longest cook time of everything that we're making. Then we'll work on our nice chimichurri, which is an Argentinian condiment. And finally, we will saute our spinach. So by the end, all our timing, everything will have a delicious meal at the end. And if you're cooking along, hopefully it'll be nice and full and excited in your own home. All right, so you ready to get started? Who's excited? Who's excited? Anyone? Anyone excited over there?
I'm I'm excited.
Okay, great. Too loud. I was excited. All right, so first we are gonna do our spinach. Because we're gonna use the same exact water. Remember, I do not like to do a lot of dishes. So we're gonna use the same exact water to cook our potatoes as we are to do our spinach. Now, I like to buy pre-washed spinach.
Ooh, pre-something.
Yes. I always am like, oh no, don't buy anything pre-washed. Spinach is one of the exceptions because to wash spinach takes so much effort. You have to get a whole big bowl of water. You have to dip your spinach in, let all the sand, there's so much like sand, like you know how you feel when you leave the beach? That's how your spinach comes when it's not pre-washed. So I'm not obsessive. I'm gonna trust that this is pre-washed because I've eaten this a million times and I've never found any sandy grit in it. If you are obsessive and you would like to rinse it off one more time, go ahead. But I'm just gonna throw all of this into my boiling water right here. I just had a lid on because it's really hot in here, so the steam, I don't want to use this as my spa today. I'd rather just go to regular spa. So this first step, or the second step, we need boiling water, but we also want to put a good amount of salt in our boiling water. Watch how much salt I put in, and don't think you're going to get high blood pressure. 2 really big pinches of salt. This is going to give our spinach some flavor, our first base layer of flavor. And I'm just going to put, all of my spinach inside. Now, blanching is a technique that we do with a lot of vegetables, basically any green vegetable. And what it does is it keeps your vegetable nice and green. You know how like when you go to a restaurant, the spinach is like bright green, and then when you cook it at your house, it's like not so green. This is how you keep your spinach or any other vegetable nice and green. Now, your green vegetables that are a little more tough, like your broccolini or broccoli or broccoli rabe. Why am I like on a broccoli trend? You're gonna cook for a little bit longer. String beans, that's another green vegetable that you don't need to cook so long.
Asparagus?
But spinach, yes, asparagus, but they won't need to cook quite as long. You just want them to be a little tender. Spinach, as you can see, it's wilted right away. So I'm just gonna go ahead and take this right out of my pot. Now, if I was only doing spinach, I would just dump this into a strainer because it's a little easier than collecting this with my tongs. I can also use another tool, like a slotted spoon. I hardly ever use this tool in the kitchen, but this is a good opportunity to get your spinach out without getting too much of that water out. And we want to get a majority of our spinach, but if we leave a little behind, it's not the end of the world. We can pick it out later. And then the final step of blanching, because we just blanched it, so it's going to stay nice and green. But if we just left it in this hot water right here, we're just cooking it more. It's still cooking as it's in hot water. So I'm going to strain it out and run it under cold water at my sink over there. Now at restaurants, when they blanch vegetables, they use ice baths. Unless you are lucky enough to have an ice machine at your house, which probably like 2% of the population in New York City, at least 2% of the population that I know in New York City has an ice machine. You can just run it under cool water, and then we have our spinach right here. So you want it to be cool to the touch. As you can see, my spinach is still a little steaming, so I might leave it under some running water just a little bit longer just so it's cold, because as anything that's hot, it's still kind of cooking. But you see, all that basically that whole box of spinach wilted down to enough for like 3 people, maybe 2 really hungry people. I could probably eat all this spinach. I really like vegetables. Questions?
This question comes to you from TT Lyle.
Yes.
Did you rinse it under cool water or cold water? Or does it matter?
Cold. So if you are rinsing your blanched vegetables underwater, you definitely want to rinse it under the coldest water possible, because you want to stop the cooking process so it stays nice and green. And if it continues to cook, this is more important for things like asparagus where the texture is really important, or broccolini. You want to make sure it stops cooking so it doesn't get like rubbery and like soft. All right, so I'm moving very quickly here because we want to get our potatoes cooking. I'm going to turn up my water to a boil now. Now I have these baby, sort of baby, these are like teenager potatoes. Honestly, I forgot my baby potatoes at Whole Foods today, so I sent Christopher out to the store, and our little Harlem store that's around the corner did not have baby potatoes, so these are teenager potatoes that we're using. I'm going to give them a rinse at the sink really quick, but that's fine. Baby potatoes, teenager potatoes, adult potatoes, you know, any potato, really, it doesn't really matter, because what we're gonna do here is cut them into the size that we want. Now these potatoes, we're making perfectly roasted potatoes, and I know a lot of the time you just cut them up and put them in the oven right away, but we're actually gonna do a two-step cooking method. Just like we did last week with our chicken breast, we did a sear and a steam. This time we're gonna do a boil and then a roast, and I'll explain to you why in a second. But let me talk a little bit more about our teenager potatoes. I don't think that's a term, but I just made it up, so it is. So, question.
Yes, question's coming from Steph Tronic. She wants to know how many potatoes should she use.
So,
I think she has baby potatoes.
I explained last week, I'm not a stickler on recipes. How many potatoes are you and whoever you're cooking for are going to eat? In general, 2 potatoes is like a good amount for like an adult woman, unless you know you're a really hungry adult woman. Maybe 3, and also depending on the size. If you're using adult potatoes, maybe 1 adult potato. Maybe 1 potato per person will do. If you're using these teenager, I would say 2 or 3 per person. If you're using the baby potatoes, like the really small ones that are like this size, probably like I can eat honestly like 6 of those. So just really, it's up to you. But you do want to make sure, because I asked you to have a sheet tray like this, you do want to make sure that however many potatoes are going to fit on your sheet tray without crowding on them together. So be cognizant of that as you're cutting your potatoes. Now, because we are, one moment, I know we have a question, because we are wanting our potatoes to cook really fast, we want to cut them pretty small. So I'm going to cut my potato. I cut this into wedges. I'll show you another one in a second. I'm going to cut them into 8 pieces each, so 8 wedges. Now potatoes are tricky because they are rounded, obviously. So if you want to be safer, you can cut a little flat edge off first. Then your potato will not roll around like this one over here. And you'll have that flat edge, and then you can cut your wedges. Now your wedges obviously won't be as perfect as those other wedges, but it's a little safer for your fingers. So I'll continue cutting my potatoes. Do you have another question?
Yes, you have a question from Tiki Lyle again. How long do these potatoes stay fresh in the refrigerator?
So potatoes, if you are keeping potatoes in your home, you actually do not necessarily want to keep them in your fridge. You want to keep them out of the fridge in a dark, cool place. Potatoes do not like moisture. So if your potatoes are around like moisture, or it's kind of like you live in a humid area, your potatoes might go bad quicker. There's nothing, actually there's a lot of things worse than the smell of a rotten potato, but the smell of a rotten potato is really disgusting. Anyone smelled a rotten potato before? Potatoes, if you keep them in a dark, cool place away from the sun, no direct sunlight, can last for a few weeks, I feel like. Potatoes and onions can last a long time. So I cut about, how many potatoes? I cut about 4 potatoes just now, so that's how many potatoes are on. And I think that's well, I'm feeding 3 people today. I'm feeding 2 hungry people, not myself. So I guess I'll cut 1 more. Question?
Question, yeah. The question is coming from HDB Chef. Skin on versus skin off. Any difference in the final product?
So, the question is about skin on your potatoes. That is a great question. So red potatoes, actually their skin have a lot of nutrients in them. They have a lot more fiber than your white potatoes. It's kind of typical in cooking that things that have color are like generally more nutritious for you. Like that's a theme in life, I think. Before I finish answering your question, I'm going to add a little bit more salt because potatoes are so starchy. They can hold a ton of salt. So our spinach, we don't want to make it so salty, but our potatoes are going to can absorb and handle a lot more salt than our spinach. So I'm going to add some more salt to our water and get my potatoes in there. Again, we want to get these potatoes cooking because they're going to take the longest to cook. So back to our skin on, skin off debate of our about our potatoes. Depends on the application of your potatoes. If you're making mashed potatoes, you probably want to take the skin off. Another note, if you are making mashed potatoes, the potatoes like russet potatoes and potatoes that do not have red skin are actually better because they're less glutinous and they make a fluffier mash. You know, if you've ever made mashed potatoes and it kind of turns out like glue, it's probably because you're using the wrong potatoes. These kind of potatoes have a lot more starch and they're a lot more sturdier, the red potatoes, which is why they're perfect for roasting because they'll hold their shape. And we're roasting these, so the skin is actually going to help control the shape as well. So roasting red potatoes are really great, but In terms of eating potatoes in general, skin on or skin off is totally a preference. I like the skin on most potatoes. Sometimes I'm just lazy to take off the skin. It really is a matter of preference, but I do know that the skin of a red potato is actually more nutritious than your regular white potato. All right, so we have our potatoes boiling in our same pot, one pot stock, that we cooked our spinach in, if you are just joining us. And we're gonna cook our potatoes in 2 different ways. So we're gonna let them boil not until they're mush, because we're not making mashed potatoes, we're roasting them. Ooh, important note, if your oven is not on, please go turn on your oven to the highest temperature it can, like 450, 425, because we want the potatoes to receive a nice hot blast of air when we put our potatoes in the oven. So please go turn on your oven if you are cooking along. But first we're gonna boil our potatoes. And why we're boiling our potatoes, because we wanna kind of make them rough around the edges. If you've ever had a really good oven roasted potato, you know you like that crispiness. That's the whole point of roasting a potato. And because we're marring the edges sort of the potato while we boil them a little, it's gonna give it a little more surface area to get crispy. So that is why we are boiling them first. I am a proponent of 1 pot stock, but 2 pots is the way to go when you're roasting potatoes. All right, awesome. So our potatoes are cooking. We can watch maybe 10 minutes or so, depending on how big you cut them. You saw my shape, I think about 10 minutes. We don't necessarily need the potato to be cooked all the way through, because again, we're putting them in the oven, but we do want them to be mostly cooked through. This whole process should take about 30 minutes or so. All right, while our potatoes are cooking, we're gonna go ahead and get started on our chimichurri, which is such a fun thing to say. I'm gonna go ahead and bring over my ingredients. We have a bowl, of course. We want to put our ingredients in a bowl. We have some garlic, we have shallots, we have lemon, we have oh no, we lost the lemon. We have some oregano, we have some parsley, catch, flying lemon. Let's put the lemon over here. We have some cilantro here. We have some parsley. The same parsley, actually, if you watched last week, I made a chickpea salad that had parsley inside. And look, the parsley was wrapped inside of this plastic bag in a paper towel. And look, it still looks exactly the same like I bought it yesterday. And last week I was joking, like, when am I ever going to use all this parsley? Found another application today. So we have our parsley, and we have mint, and we have some red wine vinegar. Now, chimichurri. Anyone eaten chimichurri before? T2 Lyle has eaten chimichurri. So chimichurri, like I said at the beginning, is actually an Argentinian condiment. It's not ketchup. It's basically a vinegar-based condiment that has herbs inside, and mainly herbs. There's garlic and parsley and oregano are the normal herbs that are always there. But there's a ton of variations, and because today we're pairing it with a halibut, I wanted it to be a little lighter and a little fresher. Oregano is a very heavy sort of herb. It's very woodsy. And parsley's pretty light in flavor, but I wanted to even lighten it even more and make it a little more fun. It's still summer for another, what's today, the 15th? I don't even know the day.
16.
It's still summer for 5 days, 5, not 10. So we want to go ahead and lighten it up, keep summer going as long as possible. Hate you guys that live in California, but I've lived here 5 years, so I can't really complain. I must like it. So keep summer going with some nice mint and cilantro. And we're gonna also add in some shallot. Shallot's gonna add a nice sweetness to it. That a lot of dishes, that the garlic, sometimes garlic is very pungent, so the shallot's gonna kind of round that out. So to begin, we're gonna cut our shallot. We're only gonna use about half of this shallot. A shallot, if you're wondering at home, a shallot is a sweeter version of an onion. It belongs to the same family as onion, the allium family. There's onion, leeks, and garlic. They're all in the same family. And to cut our shallot, we're gonna do this. You can do this with any sort of onion or any sort of allium. We always want to, you see there's 2 ends. There is this little straw hat end, and there's the end where the roots grow out. It's funny, when I worked at Sterlitov, I would explain this like 3 different times, and someone would always cut off the wrong end. So please pay attention. Root end, where there's little hairs coming out, and the little top hat that has this little, I don't really know how to describe it. It's kind of like straw hanging out. We want to cut out we want to keep these hairs. Keep the hair. You know, if you're a girl, long luscious hair, you never want to cut your hair. Maybe you do. But we're just gonna keep the root end intact because that's gonna hold the whole thing together. So I'm gonna cut off this tip end. So now we have a shallot that looks like this, hairs at the bottom. We have all these layers in here in the middle. And I'm going to now cut this in half. Again, I'm only gonna use half of this.
No, keep the root.
Keep the root end intact. So now we have something that looks like this. We'll wrap this up in some plastic and just keep it in the fridge. Shallots are another thing that you wanna keep out of your fridge. Shallots and potatoes, tomatoes don't belong in your fridge. They are happier outside on your counter. So see, so inside we have all these layers, right? And now since I kept this little root end intact, all these layers are still together. Nothing's falling apart. It's easy to cut. Now this might be a little difficult to see, but what I'm gonna do is use my knife and cut through horizontally this way. This is why and I'm gonna make about 4 to 5 cuts, depending on how big your shallot is, horizontally, just like this. This is why it's really important to have a very sharp chef's knife. Very, very important. You don't want to be sawing away, and actually my knife, honestly, is not that sharp right now. I need to sharpen it. But you don't want to be sawing away because obviously you don't want to cut your wrist. So you can steady your hand however you feel comfortable, like your fingers here, your wrist here. Normally when I do an onion, I put my whole hand here. And when I do a shallot, I don't need my hand as much. So I'll cut it through. I'm only going to do 2 cuts here. So now I have something that looks like a book. You see these 3 little layers right here? Now, and see it's still intact because I kept that root in there. It's holding everything together. Now I'm gonna run my knife through this way, vertically. I'm gonna make a few cuts vertically. And the closer you make these cuts together, the smaller your shallot pieces are going to be. So, now I have something that it's hard to see, I'm sure, from far away. I need high definition. Someone get me a video sponsor. This blooming onion, it kind of looks like a blooming onion or like a flower. What's that restaurant that had the blooming onion? Outback John's? No. Outback Steakhouse. Outback Steakhouse. I went there for prom senior year. I think that's the only time I ever ate there. But anyway, we have this blooming onion, and now I'm gonna run my knife one more time horizontally just like this. And what I'm gonna end up with, and again, if you make your cuts close together, your pieces should be pretty small. What I'm gonna end up with are pieces, and guess what, today I have a bench scraper. Woo, I don't have to scrape my knife against my cutting board anymore. What I'm gonna end up with are pretty even cuts. It's a little, yeah, there you go. Pretty even cuts, look at that, beautiful.
Ooh, that smells good. It just hit me.
Yes, it's sweet. It's not as pungent as your onion.
Make me cry.
So at this point, you know, a lot of times when you are cutting onions, and like you're just haphazardly hacking away at it, at this point is when you would run your knife through if you wanted a finer chop. But this is good for the chimichurri because I want my chimichurri to have some texture, some depth. So I'm gonna just add these to my bowl. And now, also, cutting your onion that way, I gotta do a show where I cut an onion that way because it's a little easier to see on the bigger onion. But cutting your onion that way actually does help you from crying so much because you're not bruising the skin as much if you're making sharp, distinct cuts rather than be like, ha, 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 whoa, crying. It's so much better to cut your onion or shallot that way. So, now we are gonna go ahead and get started on our herbs. Now, for those of you who like directions, I'm sorry, because remember, this is a variable recipe.
Sorry, Stephanie.
Yes, sorry, Stephanie, home cooking. You're like, oh my God, well, how much should I use? So again, like I said, traditional chimichurri has mainly parsley and oregano, but again, we're making it lighter. So I'll probably use a majority parsley, so I'll show you how much I'm gonna use. I'm gonna take about, ooh, not that much. This much parsley. I'm also not making a ton of it, so about like a handful of parsley. I'm gonna give it a rinse over here. And I'm going to, now I don't need my parsley anymore. I'm only gonna use maybe 1 stem of oregano. Now, if you have dried herbs, I'll get to that in a second. but not to fear. Don't worry, don't freak out. I'm only gonna use about this much oregano, so we'll leave that on my cutting board for me to cut. Cilantro, I'm gonna use, I really like cilantro. I know there's people that hate it, Janine at home. I'm gonna probably use actually equal amount of cilantro to my parsley. Give that a rinse over here. And when you are keeping your herbs in the fridge, my parsley and my cilantro was living together in separate paper towels in the same Ziploc bag. I'm cheap and I like to conserve, so everything can go together. You don't need all different Ziploc bags for all your herbs. And we'll get to the mint last because mint is special. So for this particular sauce, I remember last week when we were chopping the parsley, I was like, oh, no need to take off your parsley stems because it's all gonna get mixed together. There's a lot of chunky ingredients in it anyway. Chunky is a word I was warned never to use when I was doing America's Test Kitchen because it's not applicable, but it's very visual. If you can remember chunky, then you're like know exactly what I'm talking about. So, but for this recipe, we want to go ahead and take off the leaves of so remove it from your stems because this is a delicate sauce and we don't want.
Someone said cilantro doesn't taste like soap at all.
Oh, so cilantro, yeah, I agree. But some people are honestly.
These are sarcasm though. Definitely sarcasm.
Genetically disposed to not like cilantro. So if you don't like cilantro, just omit it. It's not a big deal. Remember, there's a ton of variations on this. And at the end of the day, you're making something that tastes good to you, not to me. Unless you invite me for dinner, please put cilantro in your food. All right, so I'm gonna remove the stems from my parsley, especially if you're making Mexican food. Like, come on, what's Mexican food without parsley? Or parsley, cilantro. All right, removing my stems. And we definitely want to remove the stem from our oregano. This is easy. You just hold it at the top and it comes down. It's kind of pretty satisfying removing oregano in thyme because it is a lot easier than your parsley. And as you can see, I'm just bunching all my herbs together here on my board. And then cilantro. Now, sometimes your cilantro has really heavy, like thicker stems, just like the parsley. And sometimes they're pretty delicate stems. Like it depends on how old your cilantro is, and that's how you can tell how old it is. If the stems are thicker, then it's like older cilantro. If it's a like baby fresh cilantro, it's gonna have nice delicate stems. So if your cilantro has delicate stems, no need to take them off. They'll probably chop up pretty easily. But if they has bigger stems, you probably want to take them off. So I'm going to bunch all my cilantro together. Cilantro, actually, interesting for all you cilantro lovers out there,
Janine's a cilantro lover.
is the same thing as coriander, if you have heard of coriander. So if you've ever been eating something, you're like, oh, this tastes disgusting, and you don't like cilantro, but there's no cilantro in it, it might have coriander in it. Coriander is more of a dried herb, and it's actually the seeds of cilantro and the stems of cilantro ground up together. So a lot of Indian food has coriander in it, actually.
Potatoes been 10 minutes.
All right, 10 minutes for our potatoes. I'm gonna give those a check. I just wanna take off the last of these stems of the cilantro. So we have our bunch. Anyone that was watching last week, remember how we chop herbs? Wanna chime in? I'm gonna just grab a butter knife and check. Actually, I'm gonna use one of these bootleg steak knives that probably everyone has at home to check my potato. All I'm simply gonna do is stab my potato. If it goes in pretty easy, then it's probably done. Actually, this is an instructional show. Let me show you. Let me take one out. Now, probably all your potatoes, I'm like, probably all your potatoes are not the same size. So when you are looking for one to test, take out one of the bigger ones, because if the bigger one is done, then chances are the smaller ones are probably done. So let's take that out, put it on our cutting board. Oh, perfect. It goes through without any struggle. There we go, see? And it's kind of getting, but you see that skin is holding it together. It's soft, but the skin's holding it together. Perfect, and my hands are burning. Where did my towel go? Here's my towel. All right, so we are done with our boiling water. 7:30, thank you. We are done with our boiling water, so I'm going to drain out my potatoes. Where is my strainer? Oh, my spinach is in here. Take this over. We're gonna put a pause on our herbs really quick. We're gonna get our potatoes in the oven. Pause on our herbs. Pause on our herbs. Let's make some space. There we go. Now, baking sheet. Everyone should have one. You need one when you are roasting things.
Mine looks just
If
like
you
that.
do not have a roasting pan, a lot of times people try to roast in a 9x13 and wonder why their vegetables don't get nice and crispy and delicious. It's because there's a bunch of steam getting created inside of there. This is gonna let all that air escape. So it's very important when you are roasting anything to have a pan like this. I'm lazy, so I'm putting aluminum foil on here. You do not have to, but it does make your cleanup a lot easier. I loved when I worked on the shift and I had someone else doing my dishes. I was like, oh yeah, they got it in the back. They're amazing. Yes, question.
Question from TTYO. Does it matter if you use aluminum foil versus parchment paper for roasting potatoes?
For roasting potatoes, no. Parchment paper, what I'm doing right now, while you guys see me, is I'm roughing up these potatoes even more because we want all that surface area on them. So I'm roughing it up. Then I'm gonna put it onto my sheet. We have some spinach on there. That's gonna be excellent flavor in the background. I'm also gonna put some olive oil on here. This is like fake olive oil, so I'm gonna use this. I'll explain that in a little bit. I'm gonna put a generous amount, about 1/4 of a cup, and some salt. Again, wanna season along the way, and some pepper. Does it matter if you use parchment paper or aluminum foil? No, parchment paper, your food actually comes off of easier than aluminum foil. A lot of times your aluminum foil will get stuck. Now, this is your test of your will. If your hands are nice and oven hot, you can toss your potatoes with your hands. If not, just go ahead and use a spoon or something. Again, you want to get as much rough surface area as you can. And then you want to separate your potatoes. Ooh, hot, hot, hot. And we're going to throw this in the oven. I'm going to rinse off my hands. And hopefully these get nice and brown by the time we're done cooking our fish. My oven is at 450 and I'm putting them on the top rack of my oven. All right, bring back our herbs that we were chopping. Take away the spoon we no longer need. Get rid of this bootleg steak knife. All right, clean station is a good station, makes better food. So we have our herbs. How do we chop them? Just like this. No, not. We're gonna bunch them all together as carefully as we can. And then we're gonna take our knife and run them through as close together as possible. So we're setting ourselves up for success and starting with small pieces already. I'm protecting my fingers back here before we run our knife through it and do that rough chop. The end is always a little difficult. Sometimes you have to stop and rebunch right here. There we go. Now we have nice thin ribbons if you did this properly. If you didn't, it's okay. Everything is a learning process. Do not beat yourself up. Cooking is supposed to be fun. Fun, remember? Don't be in the kitchen like, oh my God, I didn't cut it right. Don't worry, still gonna eat it. It's gonna taste good, I promise. So now I'm gonna run my knife through just like this. Now if you have dried herbs, do not be afraid. Something like a chimichurri, you definitely wanna have some nice fresh herbs in there, but if you have one dried herb, it's not a big deal. But you do want to use less of that dried herb. Dried herbs are like 6 times stronger than fresh herbs. So if you are ever using something that is dried, instead of, you notice I'm using my bench scraper, not my knife now, because I have a bench scraper, so excited. This is literally $10. It's a very useful tool. What was I saying? Oh, dried herbs are 6 times stronger. See, I almost used my knife again. 6 times stronger, so you want to make sure that you are using a little bit of it. And my suggestion would be to mix everything together and then add in a little bit of that dry herb and then taste it and see if you need more before you finish or before you just dump it all in. Now we're going to add this to our shallot bowl. Look how, this makes me so happy. Scraping up my bench scraper, little things in life.
I have a question from Janine.
Question from Janine.
Janine would like to know, what's the good substitute for cilantro? What herb?
There's not really a good substitute for cilantro, honestly. Cilantro is such a distinctive flavor, and if you don't like cilantro, you're probably not gonna like a herb that tastes like cilantro. So to get that freshness from just a fresh herb, you can always just use flat leaf parsley if it calls for cilantro. All right, I told you our mint was special and we're gonna add it at the end. Mint is an herb that you can keep like flowers in your fridge. You just wanna cover it up because the leaves are very, very delicate. That's why I said the mint was special. Today, like Whole Foods is out of everything. And I just randomly grabbed a mint from the box. And he's like, oh, the mint's over there. And I was very upset. I bought this today and it's like already dying. So make sure when you're buying your herbs, you want to make sure that they're nice and bright and green. There's nothing like death on the side right here. Question from
TTLio. What is that soaking in?
Water.
Water.
So it's just like if you had cut flowers, the water is going to keep it alive, keep it fresh. Not too much water because you don't want to mildew it at the bottom, just enough to keep the edges together. So for our mint, I'm not gonna, because it's so delicate, I'm not gonna roughly just run my knife through it like everything else. I'm gonna create what is called a chiffonade. So I took let me rinse off my mint. I took all of my mint leaves and I neatly stacked them on top of each other, just like this. And now what I'm gonna do is roll them into like a little cigar sort of situation. Let's roll that up. You people in California probably know how to do this. Denver, Washington.
New York.
You people, I'm from California. I definitely don't know how to do that. So we have a little cigar sort of situation going on here. And now I'm gonna take my knife and run it through, so I end up with what is called, fancy French term, a chiffonade. It also means little ribbons. It's a very nice, delicate cut. I'm gonna actually bring this closer to you so you can see. This is a great thing to do with delicate herbs, like, there's our chiffonade, our little chiffonade. Our delicate herbs like mint and basil. I'm gonna add that to the bowl now. Do you have a question?
Well, no, I answered. Unique's question was, how do you spell chiffonade?
Oh.
So I answered that for her.
I'm not a spelling mathematician. Spellers are not mathematicians. Actually, funny story, in the 3rd grade, I was in the spelling bee. I didn't study not one word, and I got out on the word avalanche. Still don't know how to spell avalanche. I'll never experience
go
one.
ahead and spell avalanche for Kat.
Yeah, please, let me know how to spell avalanche. Let's try. A-V-A-L-C-H-E? Maybe?
You missed the letter.
Dang it.
You letter.
All right, that's why I'm in the kitchen, not classroom. All right, so garlic. We want to add 1 clove of garlic. If you remember last week, I showed you the easiest way, well, not the easiest, but a pretty good way to peel garlic is just to take off the tip and the top and then kind of give it a smush, and then normally the skin kind of peels off. They also sell nice fancy garlic rollers, but see, that's pretty easy. They sell fancy garlic rollers. One day I'll get one. I don't know if I could spare that $6. I did just spend 10 on a bench scraper. All right, garlic into the bowl. But I'm not gonna chop my garlic. I'm gonna use my handy dandy rasp grater and rasp grate this garlic inside. If you remember from last week, I probably sang the praises of this thing because I love it. You can use lemon zest, you can do garlic, and you can see, look how fast that was, and look at that beautiful paste of garlic I have right there. So simple. And this part, if you appreciate your fingers, just throw it away. Like, who cares? Yes, question.
Question from Tina Richards.
Yes.
What are your thoughts on freezing garlic?
Thoughts on freezing garlic. So, freezing, I'm not a fan of freezing anything, honestly. I know, obviously, busy people, you have lives. You need to freeze some things sometimes, but anytime you freeze anything, you're changing the essential structure of it. Garlic, the way I would freeze garlic if I were going to, is to actually grate it into little pieces like this and then freeze it into discs on parchment paper. And once those discs are frozen, put them in a Ziploc bag so you can take them out. But garlic like this lasts forever, so, well, not forever, but for a pretty long time. So it's not like a huge thing to freeze garlic. But if you do like to save time, that is the way that I would freeze garlic. Yes, question.
Question from Stephanie. What can I use if I don't have a microplane?
If you do not have a microplane, you can use your good old knife. Now, to cut, I'll just show you really quick. If you are cutting your garlic at home, again, you want to go ahead and take off the top and the bottom. Go ahead and take off that. See how easy that is. It makes me excited every time. And what you're going to do is kind of similar to our shallot. Make nice planks, just like this. And then you have your little planks, and then you're gonna go ahead and run it through. It's not gonna be a nice paste unless you keep going and running your knife through and through, but you can get pretty small pieces. So we have those little small pieces, then you run your knife through again, and then you'll add it to your bowl. All right, chimichurri. We have all our herbs, we have our garlic. If you're just joining us, we are making halibut with chimichurri, an Argentinian condiment. So we're gonna add our vinegar. So I said you could use red or white vinegar. It really honestly does not matter. Whatever you have at home is fine. Red and white vinegar is made from red and white wine, so the difference between the red and white vinegar is the same as red and white wine. Red vinegar is going to be more varied in flavor normally, and it's going to be a little less strong, less acidic. And your white vinegar is going to be brighter and have more acidity. But honestly, if you only have one or the other, it's not going to be the end of the world if you use one or the other. So we're going to add our vinegar. I'm going to add about 1/4 of a cup of vinegar. If you have a measuring cup, awesome. If you are under 30 or around 30 and don't have a measuring cup, you probably have shot glasses. 1/4 of a cup is like a normal shot glass right here. And the double shot glass is actually 1/3 of a cup. So shot glass, 1/4 of a cup. Shots of red wine vinegar. Who's up? Who's up for shots of red wine vinegar?
No, thank you. No, thank you.
All right. So we're gonna add 1/4 of a cup of red wine vinegar, and we are gonna add just a squeeze of lemon. If you remember from last week, if you cut your lemon a little off center, I'm gonna take out these seeds right here. You're actually gonna get more juice from it than if you cut it in half. I'm gonna add about that whole piece of lemon. This is a very tart acidic sauce, so it's great for red meats normally, but it really, because we added that mint, it's gonna go really great with some fish. I'm gonna add some salt and pepper, and if you like, you can add in some hot chili flakes. But I'm making spicy spinach, so I'm gonna skip that step. Now I'm just gonna give it a mix with my fork here. And as you can see, our chimichurri is complete. Now you can make chimichurri up to 3 days ahead. It's not complete. I'm totally losing my mind. Chimichurri has olive oil as well. So we're gonna add in some olive oil to this. But as you can see, right as of now, it's not like a loose sauce. It's more of a paste, almost similar to a pesto. So we'll go ahead and stream in, and we're not trying to create emulsification here. We're just adding in olive oil. So we're gonna stream in some olive oil, and this is a place where you wanna use a nice, good quality olive oil. I'm using California Olive Ranch olive oil. Olive oil is actually a live thing, and you wanna make sure that you're using the best when you're using like a vinaigrette or something of that nature. And how you know your olive oil is really good, it will actually have a harvest date on the back of it. This was harvested October and November of 2017. This was harvested who knows when, because it's a blend. It's not actual cold pressed olive oil. This is like a juice, like an orange juice. It's a live living thing. You want to keep it in a dark corner. This you can just use willy-nilly, rub it on your body. Just kidding, don't do that. But this is very, you want to use a really high quality olive oil in your vinaigrette, or in your chimichurri. And before I answer the next question, this is another thing where you can vary. If you like things really acidic and pungent, use more vinegar. If you like things a little more oily, use more olive oil. And in this case, we're coating a fish, which is very lean. So I'm going to use a little more olive oil than I probably would if I was doing a red meat. Question.
I think you answered her question. Stephanie has a question. How much olive oil should I use?
So if you're using 1/4 of a cup of vinegar, I would use about 3/4 of a cup of olive oil. And I'm not going to taste this now because it's just going to taste like herbs. This is really a condiment that you want to eat with something else. It's kind of like just tasting salad dressing by itself. There's not really a point necessarily. So we'll just leave that aside and move all of this stuff aside too. And get ready. Let's actually check our potatoes. See how they're doing in here. They sound like they're sizzling, but they're not getting any color yet. They're still, the potatoes are in the winter time. We need to bring them to the summer. Tan little potatoes. And bring our fish over. And as we bring our fish over, I'm gonna start heating up my pan, because similar to last week, we are going to sear our fish. And in order to sear, you need a super hot pan. We want super, super hot. So I have here, I told you could use fresh or frozen fish. This is frozen cod. Now, this is why I don't really like frozen food, because you see all that juice? That's actually water, it's not juice. And this is completely soaked through. This I defrosted for 30 minutes under running water. And just look at the texture. It just looks kind of sad. Not to say you can't eat it, and I understand why you would, because it's so much cheaper to buy frozen fish. Like, for instance, I bought all of this cod for $20. It's like 6 pieces of cod. And I bought all of this halibut for $25. Yeah. So it's definitely a huge difference in price. But as you can see, and granted these are 2 different fishes. Fish? Yes? Question?
Question from the Cloudy Chef. What kind of pan are you using for the halibut?
I'm using a non-stick skillet. The specific brand is a scan pan. And I'll get to that when we put the fish in. So this fish, as you can see, it has a little better texture. When you're buying fish, you don't want it to smell like fish, honestly. And you want it to have nice, firm skin. I find in New York it's very difficult to find really good fish, but gotta work with what you got. So, our fish, similar concept to how we cooked our chicken last week when we seared our chicken. We want to, I'm actually going to cut this into manageable pieces. So I'm gonna cut this in half. About a serving size for 1 person is about 4 ounces of fish, which is actually probably a little less than this. Now, halibut and most fish comes in 2 different kinds. These are fillets. They also come in steaks. I tend to like the fillets a little bit better because they have a little more moisture in them. They don't dry out as quickly. And the halibut and cod are very lean, and they will dry out very quickly. So I want to use I want to use the fillets of fish, not the steaks. Now, searing. What do we not want when we sear? Moisture. So how do we get rid of moisture? It's going to be very difficult on our frozen fillet to get rid of all that moisture, because it's just, like I said, when you freeze things, it changes the whole consistency of whatever you freeze. But to get that outside moisture off, you can pat it dry. Pat, pat, pat. See, this sad frozen fish. Don't worry, fish. We're going to give you some nice chimichurri to make you happy and delicious. Also, skin on or skin off, totally a preference. If you like the skin, leave it on. If you don't like it, take it off. You need a very sharp knife to take off your skin. I'm going to leave it on today because it does help keep that moisture in. Now I'm going to season my fish. I'm just going to rinse off my hands. Question?
Question from Alyssa. Would you recommend rinsing your fish?
No, not necessarily if you buy it from a reputable market. If you're scared about what your fish has in it, maybe. But if you rinse your fish, you're just adding more moisture, which is going to be really hard to create that sear again. All right, so season our fish very well. This is the only, we're going to coat it with chimichurri, but this is our layer of seasoning. We're going to give it some pepper. Now, interesting, I read, remember last week when we cooked our chicken and it got that nice crispy brown color? So fish doesn't have the glucose in it like chicken does, or meats do. So it doesn't tend to brown as easily as chicken or beef. So I was reading today in my Cook Science from America's Test Kitchen that in order to help brown your fish, you actually can add a little bit of sugar on top. So I'm gonna try, it won't really add flavor. I'm gonna try to add sugar to one of my fillets and just see the difference in coloring. So again, I'm not adding a ton of sugar. It's just to help enhance the browning. And hopefully at the end, we'll be able to know the difference. Now, the back. Our pan is nice and hot, kind of, almost hot. I'm gonna add in my bootleg olive oil. Sorry, the brand, but it is. To just coat the pan. Not too much. I'm not deep frying my fish here. Around, just like that. Turn on my flame on high. There we go.
How did you season the fish? With just salt?
We just seasoned the fish with salt and pepper. And one of them, if if you're just joining us, I actually put a little bit of sugar because fish does not have the glucose that meats do, so it doesn't brown as easily. So, now that our pan is nice and hot and there's salt all over my floor, you can feel it on my feet, I feel like I'm at the beach, I'm going to add in my fish. Now I have my halibut and I have my cod. I asked you to get halibut, that's my preference here, but any white fish will work with this recipe. You just want to make sure before we sear it, it's nice and dry. We patted it down with paper towels, and then we're going to put it in our nice hot pan. Another tip when you're searing, you don't want to overcrowd your pan because overcrowding creates moisture. That is the noise we want to hear. Put this 2 fishes in. 1 fish, 2 fish, 3 fish, 4 fish. I'm keeping my skin on. You can take it off. I think it helps keep in that moisture. It's gonna end up coming off anyway. You'll see when I put it in the oven. So I have 3 pieces in my pan here. And I'm just gonna let them go. Just let them like hang out for 2 minutes. I'm not going to touch them because if you move them around, it's gonna prevent them from browning as well as they can. And while our fish, I'm gonna just flip over my cutting board because I think I had fish on there. While our fish is going, I'm going to take some more garlic and actually just slice it up for our, I'm going to rinse off my knife because I cut it with fish. I'm going to slice up my garlic for our sauteed spinach. Again, 1 top, 1 bottom, smush it down. Oh, look, it's smushed into pieces that are perfect. 1 top, 1 bottom. Smush it down again. So we have some nice crushed garlic. 2 questions. Let's hear our questions.
First question, are you doing fillet side down first or skin?
I am doing my fillet side down first because that's going to be my presentation side. If you want really crispy skin, you want to do your skin side down first. Whatever side you put in the pan first is going to get browner faster because that's the first thing you put in the pan is going to be the hottest your pan will ever be. Your pan will never be as hot as the first thing you put in. So if you want crispy skin, skin side first. If you don't really care about the skin, put your presentation side down first. Other question?
Other question is from Janine. Do most fish cook the same amount of time for a good searing, and how long is that?
Yes. When you are searing something, in general, fish, take about the same amount of time to sear. It's about 3 to 5 minutes, but it does depend on your thickness of your fish. Fish that are thick, normally like halibut, salmon, swordfish, what else is thick? Shark can be thick. Those you're gonna want to cook for 3 to 5 minutes. If you're cooking like a flounder, which is super thin, like sometimes flounder can be as thin as your knife, not quite as thin as your knife, but as thin as like a dish towel, 2 layers of dish towel, it's only gonna be like 1 or 2 minutes. But you want to make sure you have a super, super hot pan when you do that. I'm gonna check my fish. Doesn't really have that color I'm looking for yet. Whoop. And it's starting to flake off, which goes to show the other tool I asked you to have today, fish spatula. This is like a gigantic fish. It's like as big as my head. Fish spatula, a great tool to have in your kitchen for fish because fish is very, very delicate. So when you flip your fish over, it is going to keep your fish intact. It's a little more dexterous. You can move it around. And fish spatula is not only good for fish, it's good for pancakes, it's good, and it's so much easier to clean than your regular plastic spatula, which mine is in the dishwasher right now, but its metal is so much easier to clean than plastic. Fish spatula is definitely a thing you should have in your house. Questions?
I have a question from Chris Coy. He would like to know about Old Bay seasoning. Is that good for fish? How do you feel about that?
Old Bay seasoning, if you're from Maryland, you're probably very familiar with it. It is a typical seafood seasoning. Our potatoes are getting some nice color. I just wanted to check those. I'm going to throw them back in. It's a typical seafood seasoning. If you like the flavors inside of it, we always have Old Bay in our... I'm not exactly... So there's celery salt, spices, including red pepper, black pepper. Sounds like there's some secret stuff in here. Very, very used on seafood. So it's a good seasoning. It's an all-purpose seasoning. If you don't want to have a ton of seasonings in your house, it's a good one to have if you just want some extra flavor. All right, I'm going to check our fish. I'm down a sheet pan in my house, so I'm going to use this big old pan. And what I'm gonna do is now take my fish and transfer it to, if you have a pan, the other way, transfer it to a sheet pan. Pretend this is a sheet pan. Transfer it to a sheet pan and put it in the oven to finish cooking. There we go. Those are giant pieces of fish, by the way. So I want you to see nice and close. We have our fish. It's not cooked all the way through, and I didn't cook it on both sides on the stove because I want my fish to have a nice moisture to it. How do we tell when fish is cooked? How do we tell when anything is cooked? Thermometer. Look, I have all the new tools today. I have my Thermapen thermometer today. I'm very excited. And I'm just gonna temp the fish. Remember when you're temping something from the side? And you want your fish to be at about 140. So right now the internal temperature of this halibut is at 73. So I'm gonna throw it in the oven to finish cooking. Yes, question.
I have a question from Stephanie. She needs help. Her fish is sticking to the pan. What does she do?
If your fish is sticking to the pan, you may not have put enough oil, or your non-stick skillet is no longer non-stick. I find that at a lot of homes. I'm gonna just rinse out this pan really quick. It's gonna make a lot of noise. I found that a lot of homes, your non-stick skillet is actually not non-stick anymore because you've been using metal and scraping it around. This scan pan is actually great because you can use metal objects on it and it's not gonna ruin it. But like this little, I don't know where this came from, Target, Ikea, Amazon. If I use a metal fork in here, it's gonna scrape and it's gonna have like ridges and root, and then it's not non-stick anymore. So throw that away and get a new one, and don't use forks and knives in your pan. But right now, you're having the issue right now because you're cooking along. Take a spatula, any kind of spatula, and just very delicately try to pick it up from there. And like just as careful as you can. And then you just gotta transfer it to your other sheet. I'm gonna keep this pan going back here. Woo. Because I'm going to add in some butter and saute my spinach. We have 2 minutes until I am at an hour. So Instagram followers, I'm sorry, I might lose you. They capped me at an hour, isn't that so sad? But I promise I will post the finished product on my page. Please ask any questions. Feel free to DM me if you have any cooking questions, anything you want to see. I'm going to add some butter to my pan and the garlic that I just kind of casually smashed. And I'm going to just saute that together on a lowish heat. And now I'm going to also take out my potatoes because those should be done. Let's bring this over. Potatoes. Now, I find no matter what I do, whenever I use aluminum foil, the potatoes tend to stick to my aluminum foil. Another great job for your fish spatula. Just kind of, ease your potatoes off without breaking the aluminum foil off. You can see there's some nice crust on here. I feel like my oven here at this house is not calibrated correctly, and it never gets as hot as it actually should. An easy way to know how high your oven is, because your oven is not always the temperature it says it is to go ahead and put an oven thermometer in your oven and see if it's actually at the temperature that I say, or that you want it to be at. So our butter and our garlic is smelling delicious back here, so we're gonna just go ahead and put in our spinach that we blanched. We blanched it in some hot water, cooled it down with some cold water so it's nice and bright and green. And now we're just gonna saute it in a little garlic and butter. And I promised that it was gonna be spicy spinach, so we're gonna add some red chili flakes. We have a question, as much or as little as you want. Spicy still kind of scares me, but I'll add a good amount there. I'm also gonna add some salt to this. Question, yes.
Question, yes. We have a question from CO4 What kind of non-stick skillet can you use metal utensils with?
So, like I said earlier, I'm using a scan pan, which is actually the best non-stick skillet out there on the market, because you can use your metal spatulas, your fish spatulas, without any worries of it scraping. It actually has a lifetime guarantee too. Just the way that they have created it. And some of them can go in the oven and the dishwasher, not mine because it has a plastic handle. But I still am weary though. I don't ever just take something and like scrape at my non-stick skillet. I like to think of my non-stick skillet as very delicate. It's also is like $100. So anything that's $100 is very delicate. So yeah, scan pan's the way to go if you want to invest. Yes, scan pan is the pan I'm using. Now my spinach is just sauteing back here. I don't have to cook it, it's already cooked. I just want to get it nice and coated in that butter. And I seasoned it with some salt and some hot chili flakes. This is a very easy way to do any kind of vegetable. I love doing vegetables like this. And now it's about time to plate up our food. Our halibut's been in the oven for about 4 minutes now. Because we seared it on one side, it should be pretty cooked. But I'm gonna go ahead and plate up my potatoes, which are nice and crispy because we boiled them first. Look at that color. Yum. We boiled them first to get some nice rough edges on them. I do not suggest using your fingers at home. I cook a lot. I've been cooking 8 years. Yeah. We boiled them first to get rough edges on them so they will have nice crispy coating. So I'm just going to put a few of our potatoes on the plate. Remember, you eat with your eyes first, so plating is super important when you are cooking. Now I'm going to add some of my spinach. Where are my tongs? Here are my tongs. Now spinach is one of those things that can leak all over your plate. So if you care about presentation, this is a quick trick for spinach. I'll grab some paper towels and I'll just blot my spinach down on some paper towel, just so all that liquid doesn't rinse around or go around on my plate. And now we will take out our fish. Just take out our fish out of the oven. Remember, we seared our fish first. We seared our fish first on the stovetop in our nonstick skillet with just a little bit of olive oil, seasoned with salt and pepper. I did try the trick of sprinkling a little salt on the fish. So if you can see, or a little sugar on the fish to create more browning. This one had the sugar, so it's a little more brown. The one that is the most brown had just a sprinkling of sugar. It's not really gonna add any flavor, it's just adding more color. Finished our fish in the oven. How do we check the doneness of our fish? We want a temperature of 140 to 145. That's gonna be perfect, flaky, amazing. Oh my gosh, we're at 140 exactly.
Yes.
This is gonna be the best fish ever.
Fair high five.
All right, so we're gonna take out, I'm gonna take the prettiest one out. Prettiest big fish out. Whoa, slipping around. You've already been caught, fish, you can't get away. All right, put this back on the stove back here. And then, if you remember if you were here earlier, we made a nice chimichurri. Chimichurri is a traditional Argentinian condiment made with parsley and garlic. We lightened ours up to go with our fish, and we added some mint, some shallot, and some cilantro, so it's still summertime in a plate. I'm gonna grab a spoon and just go ahead and put a little bit, or a lot of it of that all over our fish. Just nice. And we made this a little more oily than acidic because fish is very light and very lean, so we can use a little more oil here. And here we have our halibut with chimichurri, crispy roasted potatoes, and spicy spinach. Thank you so much for joining me. If you are still cooking along, I will be available for questions. Just put them on below. Next week again is viewer's choice. I've had a lot of comments about vegetarian food, vegan food. Someone asked for duck, desserts. So what do you want to see? Let me know. Type it on down in the comments. Chefleen.com if you need any more information about me. Please sign up for a weekly email list. You can receive the emails straight to your inbox with the recipe list and tips and tricks and questions that were answered in this episode. Hope to see you again soon. Thank you. If you like what you see, please share with your friends. See you next week. Happy eating. Goodbye. How do I turn this off? You guys want to see? Yum, delicious.